All right, cool, my friend. Well, then let's get into it. I just want to kind of give a little bit of context for those that are listening. We're going to be talking about, and here is Zach with Gravitee. Here's the head of demand gen or director, head of demand gen, the kind of core demand gen lead, let's call it. And so we're going to be getting into all things LinkedIn ads. And this comes up all the time across all of our clients, across all LinkedIn. Everyone all day long wants to figure out how to run more profitable LinkedIn ads. So I think where I wanted to start is there's some prereqs I think that don't get talked about as much. And this is not like the technical tactics and the stuff inside a LinkedIn ads account. It's the stuff that comes before. It's the stuff that you have to think about before you start running a campaign or before you start scaling up. And I wanted to get your thoughts on it. Maybe I'll kind of take the lead to give a few just kind of general things to get the conversation started. But I'd love to kind of hear from you, maybe directly from experience at Gravitee, or maybe just in general, in the world of demand gen and B2B, because you've been in the space for a while. But there's some prereqs that are really, really important. And the couple that come to mind immediately are that a lot of times people think of paid ads as that's the strategy, that's my marketing strategy and the thing that I'm going to do, right? But paid ads in general, whether it's LinkedIn or anything else, is not a marketing strategy. There's many other parts that go into that for it to be successful. And the biggest thing for me is targeting all the time. And most people think about it like, hey, these are the different things I can do to make an audience, a job function or titles or target account list or whatever. But it's really not about that at all. It's actually about making sure that from the front end, you've actually taken your TAM and you've broken that down into segments logically that of the people that actually are your ICP today, where you can win them. Because what you sell to investors is your TAM. What you go market with is not. That's where you pick out your ICP and you say, hey, these are the people that I want to go after with this message and this content. So to me, that's always one really big thing before you even get going on it. But what's your thought process around that? I mean, before you kind of get going in a LinkedIn campaign, or if anyone wanted to start something, what are some things maybe you think about and say, like, hey, these are the things that really need to kind of be done first before we actually launch?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's obviously this is a tricky one for like a lot of startups and stuff. But I think like the biggest thing for me, like if you're going to go the LinkedIn route and you're going to use it as kind of like you're going to go full funnel strategy, like on that channel, like you have to have that product market fit established. Otherwise it's just going to feel like a mess. When you're getting going, and really it's just going to be a finger to the wind, with what the kind of messaging that you're putting out and all that stuff. So obviously the legwork that you have to do to establish product market fit is going to be different for everybody. But as you know, if you can come back to kind of like this universal problem that you have, and you can tie that back to an audience, and then and then really tie it back to like, how am I communicating this problem? How am I creating my sort of like unique perspective, and then really interrogating it to say, okay, yes, it truly is unique. Yes, it truly does. It's not a nice to have. It is a must have. That's kind of, I think that's kind of like some of the issues that we're seeing today with a lot of tech is like, they're all really, really nice to haves. Are they must haves? That's why a lot of people are abandoning tools, and, budgets are getting slashed, and that tech's the first to go, is because it was just a nice to have. And so you can establish yourself as that must have, and then do the technical exercise like you're saying, where you're establishing your TAM, you're going inside of that, and then maybe niching down a little bit further to say, this segment specifically is who we really want to target, kind of validate that unique value proposition. And then, and then you can start executing the strategy and looking at, and that's when you go, is LinkedIn the channel where that ICP lives? And I can show up in front of them with, not just show up in front of them, but also show up in front of them with the right message, and in a way that they are going to be motivated to consume the message. That's kind of like that. So it's kind of like taking all those steps and then understanding that full journey and how they want to get to that last point where they're raising their hand and saying, okay, everything you're saying makes sense. You've
Uh-huh.
empathized with me, and now I'm ready to engage you in a solution conversation and try and figure out how specifically you can solve my problem. And
I want to
so,
go back to, I'm going to interrupt you real quick because I want to go back
yeah,
before I lose it. You said something interesting, and it's something that I think we all talk about, right? It's like, hey, figure out where your audience is and where they hang out. And I think it's generally good advice, but how do you do that? Like, how do you fundamentally think about saying, okay, LinkedIn is a channel where they hang out. I guess I should be spending there versus, well, no one seems to be on LinkedIn at all. They're all on Facebook or another channel. Like, how do you think about it? Because I don't think it's completely black and white the way you do it. I'll give you my 2 cents after, but
yeah, no, it's not. And so the way that I like to think about it is like if I have a problem, like where's the place that I go for an answer? And
yeah,
where is that community going to be that I trust that's going to help me find that answer as fast as possible. So,
right.
so like a good example, so Gravitee, for example, you know, our audience is a very technical audience. They're developers, they're engineers, you know, they work with APIs all day. They don't necessarily like to, you know, talk to people all day. They're more like, I'm going to search and hunt for my answer. I'm going to pull it. And,
Yeah.
you know, I'm going to do the work. So places like Stack Exchange, Stack Overflow, places where
Mm-hmm.
they have those huge communities of developers and engineers where they can ask a super technical question and get a very concise technical answer and then get that answer validated by the community,
Mm-hmm.
upvoted, you know, that same thing. Same thing with Reddit. You know, Reddit's, you
Yeah.
know, probably a little bit different in how you know, a developer might use that community. But again, it's
Mm.
thinking about, okay, if I'm going to serve an ad, like if I'm going to serve a display ad in Stack Exchange, Stack Overflow, you know, I need to be thinking about how that ad is coming across to that audience and how they're seeing it. Does it make sense within the
Mm-hmm.
platform? You know, is it disconnected from the other content that they'll be seeing? And,
Mm.
you know, you're kind of engineering it for that. Same thing with Reddit. You know, if
Yeah.
we're going to do a Reddit campaign and, you know, we're targeting IT communities or engineering communities, you know, it might be a more like meme based content that we deliver where it's more like you know, like a misery loves company play where we're empathizing with their problem and how nobody else
Right.
outside of their community understands them, and you know, using that to kind of like build trust and get them
Yeah.
to know who we are and engage them that way. So yeah, so
Yeah.
I think that for me is always kind of like where I start. You know, if I'm thinking about a question that I
Mm.
have, where do I go? And, you know,
Yeah.
as a marketer, you know, knowing that LinkedIn is rife with marketers, I can go there and I can find lots of people who know way more than I do about a lot of different things. And I can just, you
Yeah.
know, I can just keep tabs on them, or I can ask them specifically, you know, hey, you know, give me more information about this, you know,
Yeah.
and so yeah, so that's kind of where I start.
Yeah. I think it's an interesting one. I mean, because I mean, what's completely clear is that no one just hangs out on one channel, right? We're on multiple. For example, I spend most of my time on LinkedIn and Instagram. I'm never on Facebook, never on Snap, never on Twitter, never on Reddit, never on Stack Overflow, ever, right? I never have it. I just don't. So, you know, I just kind of picked a
Mm-hmm.
couple of channels, right? And like those are the ones I spend time on. But say you and I are inside the same ICP and we're targeting people, you know, in LinkedIn or whatever channel, you may have a different set of channels that you look at. I mean, for example, like for you, like what are your top 2 or 3 channels that you're on? Same ones
Mm-hmm.
or different
Yeah, I would say for me, it's probably LinkedIn's probably the only one that I'm
that you're on at
active on
all?
anymore. Yeah,
Yeah, well, that's really interesting
yeah.
then. So you're the exception, minus maybe Google searches and things of that nature, or something like that. I'm sure, but I think the point is for me, like the way I always think about it when people ask this question is, first like organically, what's happening, like in terms of groups posting and other things like that. You can actually learn a lot because if there's a lot of conversation happening around the target person that you're trying to go after, a target group of people that you're trying to go after, then it could be potentially a great channel for you to invest in on. And that can purely come from just understanding the channel dynamics, spending time in there, getting active in the channel, et cetera, because people are showing up to not just look at ads, they're showing up to look at you and what Zach has to say or something like that related to demand gen, or what I have to say or someone else has to say, et cetera. So sometimes those are great ways because those are what pull more people in. But ultimately, like, it doesn't stop at just one channel. It's kind of looking a little bit at, a little more broadly. But
Yeah, for sure.
but I thought your last point, to kind of circle back, so product market fit, yeah, number one, I mean, that's a huge one. And I think that's going to be different to your point for each person. So we said targeting, we said unique point of view. You said, we talked about just in terms of TAM to ICP and breaking it down. And then obviously product market fit being the big one, which clearly, I mean, if you're at a point when you have, not a lot of social proof, not feeling confident that the product is actually sticking, and you don't have any type of repeatable sales process yet, you probably have no business even advertising to begin with. You probably should kind of hang tight a little bit. What most people they'll do, and I'm sure you've seen this as well, is they kind of jump in and they want to test and message and do all this other stuff, right? But there are other channels you could do this a lot cheaper. I mean, it's extremely expensive to do that, especially on LinkedIn. If you've got a really tight audience to do that type of thing, and you're talking about months of testing, thousands of dollars, tens of thousands of dollars, depending. So I think, to your point, holding off until you have product market fit is super wise.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, and like, again, to like kind of meet that need there, you've got these unique companies that are coming out like Winter, where you can do a very dedicated message test or user testing, across your platform or website, and you can get that feedback and really, get more validation for that positioning that you're is your hypothesis, and kind of like grow it from there. And so, so I think those, the things that have emerged as a result of people probably going to market through a channel like LinkedIn, spending loads of money and then not getting anything in return. They've learned that lesson, and there are solutions for them. So
all right, well, let's fast forward and let's say we are post product market fit. Let's say we do have a general idea of our ICP. What if I wanted to run a LinkedIn ad strategy right now? Like, in your mind, like, what are the top pieces of content or the things that someone needs to facilitate running different campaigns across the cold layer, prospecting, down to retargeting, and the warm layer? Like, what would you say are like the key elements that you guys maybe are running a Gravitee, if you want to comment on that, or just in general, some things that you think one should have? And then I want to get into where you think those should be layered too, from a strategy perspective.
Yeah, so we've run a lot of different experiments, with this, and kind of like the thing that we've learned is that testimonials happen to be this like really powerful and transcendent thing that can kind of like, you can blanket them across like just about any part of the journey, and there's not really like a disconnect, as long as you're not making yourself too much of the hero of the story. So as long as you're capturing that information and that testimonial in a way that really showcases this is the type of problem that this business has, and then the way that you're trying to architect that is you're showing that story to people that fit that ICP and that that specific use case or problem, and communicating how you solve it, and that's been like a super impactful thing for us, and just helping you kind of build that trust initially, where nobody cares who you are or what your product is, but if they can see, okay, this company was spending millions of dollars on these very complex IT solutions, and this was a way that they took a hard look at how they were doing things, and said there has to be a better way to do it. Let's seek out what that solution is, and then the end result being we've reduced complexity, we've reduced IT costs, and we're ready for the future of whatever our digital transformation journey is, and kind of help us stay ahead of all of our competitors as a result. That's powerful stuff, and you don't have to know who's doing that for you, but that's going to make you curious just about anywhere you are in your journey. And so we've been kind of testing that as like our brand awareness, and running them in that layer, like to a cold audience. I will say like a very targeted cold audience. We've done a lot of testing around just the kind of technology they're using. We're with our ICP, we're kind of fortunate that like a certain set of technology is very specific to our solution. There's a lot of very specific problems related to that technology and how it works, how it plays with others, in the space. And so that's kind of helped us get people's attention very early on. And then we kind of lead them into, like a thought leadership nurture, almost talking about kind of where the API industry is headed and what kind of new challenges are emerging. And we do that, with kind of like a combined internal thought leadership team and then customers and partners. So we're getting, some of that credibility. It's not just us, it is other people that are experiencing these things, other people in the industry. And then
so you're using, just to chime in, so just to sum up what you just said, so you're saying testimonials in both, not only the cold layer and the warm, but ideally you're actually saying more leading against a cold group of people, cold meaning people that have not heard of your brand or haven't been to your website in 180 days plus, and then retargeting them with thought leadership. And I've seen some of the videos you're talking about, maybe like there's some like webinar things or some chats about all the various things that you guys do, Gravitee. That's the type of thing you're talking about?
Yep. Yeah. So definitely webinars is a big strategy of ours. And then, this is kind of like counter to everything you see in, demand gen and stuff, but our audience really likes ebooks and white papers. They like that,
Sure.
They like to have that resource to come back to and read and kind of dive into. And, there's a lot of different technical information that, frankly, you can't get across in a 45-second video clip, or,
Sure.
even like a 10-slide carousel is not going to be enough to get that information over to them. They're going to want to break it down, go to the code base, pull some of that code, do very technical things with the information that you're giving them. So they need to have it kind of on hand. So that is a play that works well for us. And then when it gets down to kind of like that more, even further down the retargeting, to where people have seen what we can do, they kind of know the industry, they see the trends, they've heard all the expert insights, all that stuff. Then we get into kind of like what makes Gravitee unique to the market, and highlighting those key functionalities and how it gives you a competitive advantage. And that,
so is it like product marketing ads and the retargeting ads you're talking about? Just kind of saying like, hey, these are the top 3 differentiators as it relates to some of the competition that's out there. So you may not mention competition, but you definitely make sure people know, hey, this is what you can use Gravitee for, et cetera. And then you just kind of rotate those ads there.
Yeah. And then another strategy that we kind of leaned pretty heavily into last quarter and into this quarter were some like pretty direct head-to-head competitive comparison, some ads. And what that helped us do was we were able to kind of kill 2 birds with one stone and kind of get our brand out in front of the users of those technologies, and then also stimulate demand gen and get into some fairly sizable deals where people were using this kind of legacy technology that couldn't keep up with what we were able to do, and we were able to kind of position ourselves as the better solution. So so it's been interesting because I'll say this company is probably the most technical like product that I've worked with.
Mm.
So it's really interesting just from that perspective.
Yeah.
But yeah, but it's going to be different for everybody. So yeah, but
Right.
I'm sure you have lots of examples of, you know, different ways that you guys have done things. I'm not sure if you have like a out of the box
Yeah.
like playbook.
There's a general, like, well, I always like to call it like a guide, right? A guide that we follow. It's a starting point, so you don't reinvent the wheel over and over again, because there are similarities across a lot of the strategies that you run no matter the company. There's certainly things that work better than others, and different content that performs better than others and all things like that. But yeah, so you said tofu testimonials on the top, and then you said thought leadership and testimonials at the bottom. I mean, the way that we think about it is there's kind of first four buckets really. You've got product marketing, you've got social proof, thought leadership, and then content, or tofu content, whatever you want to call it. Some people would differentiate between tofu, mofu, and bofu, and all that nonsense. And I think it's an okay way to maybe categorize content to a degree, but I think it's actually better to layer in more just understand the buyer journey from top and all the different questions they answer, and then make sure you have content associated with those. So whether you name it something, like HubSpot did years ago, or something else, it's just important that you've got that content based on where they are in the journey. So the big thing that we do is, like, in the cold layer, the first starting point is actually always product marketing ads, and making sure that people know the big problem that the company's trying to solve, and to make people aware that, hey, this is something that you need to look at now. It's not a push it off till later type of thing. So it's a combination of squeezing on a pain point, or bringing out an outcome that the tool can bring, and making sure that that language also is not just increase revenue, right, which means nothing, but something very specific that
Yeah.
allows someone to get what they actually want. And the more specific, ideally, the better. Most people don't want to get that specific because it reduces the potential reach of the campaign, and they want to have some big broad message like connection matters or something. And you're like, I don't know what connection matters even
Yeah.
means, but thanks, man. I appreciate it. Thanks.
I think I've seen that ad. Yeah.
Probably, yeah. It's probably out there somewhere. Someone will steal it and use it and, like, oh, that's good. That sounds good. But yeah, usually it's usually that at the top, right? And then we don't do a lot of social proof. It's interesting. I know we've done some case studies and whatnot in the cold layer before, and those have done well, because I think case studies are great as they provide a lot of context around the tool. And, of course, they give the social proof of hopefully a notable brand that's already using the product. Like, holy shit, I didn't know that they were using it. And because they're using it, maybe I should check it out. But we haven't done a lot of that. Typically reserve a lot of the social proof in the retargeting layer, where we're trying to build trust. So cold is, again, product marketing, content, and then potentially thought leadership, assuming you have good content like that. And you said it earlier before, if you have some type of unique point of view, or a point of view that is unique to you in your mind, then I think content, whether it's in a podcast, a keynote, a webinar, any one of those three are probably all good ways. You could also do it in a blog to a degree as well. But I think a lot of times video actually ends up working a lot better. So those are kind of the three buckets on the top. And you may not start with thought leadership and all the other stuff at once, but at minimum, product marketing in the cold. And then the idea, as is we want to try to move people that have been exposed to the ads in that layer and or clicked on them into retargeting. And then it's all about how do we build trust and answer questions and remove objections they potentially have about moving forward. And the big things for us are always ultimately give them some type of offer or something to move them forward. And I think a lot of people will just do request a demo, which we do for some of our clients too. But if we can think of something that's a little more creative, something that they get, a deliverable, or some, for example, Cognism does 25 free leads, even though I wouldn't really call those leads. They're just giving a sample of their data is what they do. And I think you worked for a B2B sales intelligence company or something like that in the past.
Yep.
So you kind of know that game.
Yep.
And then, so you can think of ideas like that. And then you layer in your testimonials, your case studies again, and retargeting, right? So you're building up the context. People are getting more like, oh, wow, like they actually work with a lot of brands that I do, that I already know. And then lastly, ungated demos. So whether you're sending it to like a product tour and you send it on your website through a tool like Toriel, or there's a new really cool tool called Testbox right now that we've been trying to experiment around with some other clients. You can send them to that, allow them to get some exposure to the tool, play around with it. This assumes you're not running like a PLG trial motion. And or you can do simple looms and have ungated demos running in a video campaign in the retargeting layer, where it's not the whole demo, it's contextualized. So you're saying like, hey, you know how it feels when XYZ. Yeah, it's a pain in the ass, and I was there too. Let me show you actually how you can do this in a couple quick steps. First, you go here, boom, 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 but you're kind of providing a story and a narrative that hopefully lines back up with the overall marketing strategy and your strategic narrative. So to me, like that's kind of how it breaks down, and then we'll do other cuts between retargeting. But I'll stop. That's kind of a lot to say all in one.
Yeah.
We're actually gonna, do a post on Thursday about this exact thing. So,
Yeah.
but yeah,
Yeah, I think I think the ungated demos is a really interesting one that I think people are like just now starting to like they're starting to accept. You would see like even I don't know, even a couple like maybe 1 or 2 years ago, it was common to gate like a video demo.
right,
But I think like time and time again, kind of like the approach that like we've seen is that if you ungate the demo and you do it architected the way that you're talking about, where you're highlighting like what makes it really unique, and attaching it to a narrative that makes sense to kind of like across your customer journey.
right,
What you'll do is you'll reduce that opportunity cycle, and you'll start getting that to that closed won space a lot faster than you would if you're creating all this friction across your journey. And that's definitely been a huge goal for us at Gravitee. Is we start looking at we start we started digging into the demo process and saying, if we did ungate this, there's a lot of questions that ungating the demo answers immediately.
mm-hmm.
And then as soon as those questions are out of the way, that allows sales to take maybe 1 or 2 calls off of the schedule to just get into, okay, here's the core functionality that you want to use Gravitee for. And then we can get to the T's and C's and signing a contract much faster
Exactly.
than if you had to do discovery, demo, all these different things that are, just kind of like, you're just kind of wasting people's time and frustrating them when you have that data and content available. You just have to get it in a way that, again, it's consumable.
Yeah.
But it all works to your advantage. And I saw something that you posted a couple weeks ago, I think, where you were talking about just again, coming back to consumption. If you're thinking about really what you want to do is you want to get that message across. You want to know that somebody has they understand the concepts and they've consumed the content. So delivering it in an ungated fashion in something like a even 5 to 6 minute video across LinkedIn ads, in that very targeted retargeting layer, if you can see, I'm getting people to that 75-50% mark on this long video for LinkedIn, that's a pretty good indicator that consumption is good and the message that you are putting out there is connecting. And then you're gonna be able to get those people watching again to that opportunity stage at a much higher frequency than just retargeting with request a demo ads. So I thought that was really interesting. It's definitely something that we're going to be trying here in the next couple months. See how it works.
I'd love to be able to call that a demo, but I don't think many people would allow you to get away from that. Yeah, demos are up like 1,000%. It's crazy.
Our cost per demo is I
haven't talked to any of them. Oh, but it's in channel. Well, we don't know who they are? No, we don't. I mean, like there's pros and cons to it, no doubt. I mean, I think with everything I say or anyone else says, I mean, it's always, there's so much nuance to all this stuff, right? It's not over index. I mean, I've talked about 0-click ads and the idea, and I'm not the first to say this either. There's a lot of people. Amanda over at SparkToro had a great blog on this, and many others have said things about finding ways to increase the amount of people that are consuming your content. And there's cons to that, because when you have a situation when you do have an ungated demo and do exactly what you just said, which is here's a quick video, whether it's 2, 3, 4 minutes or whatever it is, ideally short to the point, with a core CTA and something focused around a solution. I mean, many times you're not going to know who was reaching out. I mean, you're not going to know who's watching it, so you don't get that data. You don't get the email and go be able to go after those people. You can get data from impressions and clicks from LinkedIn. So you can get some of that data, and you can also use tools like Hockey Stick, and now Dream Data, I think, is doing it as well, where they integrate in with HubSpot and other CRMs so that you can layer in, hey, these are the amount of impressions and clicks this specific company got from our LinkedIn campaigns, et cetera. But the point is like, you got to just try to understand, all right, are we trying to make it easier for the person to buy from us, or are we trying to make it more difficult? And if your goal is to make it easier, then generally it's kind of a hard argument to say that we can, for a fraction of the cost of what it costs us to do a demo or someone to get on the website, we can put a video inside the channel and pay a third, a fourth, a fifth of the price I've seen in many cases across clients we've done this for, versus sending all the traffic to the website to a demo page and get them to book a demo. Now, clearly, like, the intent level is higher, right? The intent level of someone wanting to talk to sales versus watching a video and channel, those are different things. So I'm not saying those are the same things. However, you're still going to weed out a lot of the people that are potentially not a good fit, which I think you said as well. So maybe you do see demos potentially fall initially because you've weeded out some people that are not a good fit. But I would venture to say, and what we're seeing, because we've just been experiencing the last 3 months or so with some clients, is that over time we'll see more demo requests coming in at a higher quality and a higher conversion rate from lead to op. And that's what we're seeing. So I mean, you just have to kind of think about those things and determine what those goals are and how you're going to measure that type of campaign.
Yeah. And, that's, I know, like, this is probably beating a dead horse, but, like, that's the name of the game now, is like, how are you reducing your acquisition costs, and what are the levers you're going to pull to do that? And so, if you start an experiment like that, and you begin looking at, okay, this is when we started this, and this was, our benchmark lead to opportunity percentage. I would be willing to place my money that you're going to improve that conversion percentage, with a tactic like this, if you're doing it the right way. And sales is going to be happier, and your CFO is going to be happier. And
exactly.
You're going to get, your budget's not going to get cut next year. So,
well, that's actually a good transition maybe to wrap up on one thing, because I think someone mentioned this on a LinkedIn post. I think it was from last week on one of mine. And the big question was, all right, well, that all sounds great, but how do I set proper expectations with management? And especially when you have a CEO or a CFO that wants some level of proof that it works. And they want to say, wait a minute, so what you're about to do is take X thousands of dollars and start promoting something of which there's not going to be a form. You want them to legit just consume it in channel, whether that's, by the way, a demo or any other type of asset. And you're telling me we're not going to have any attributable click back to some type of deal? Like, how do you think about that? I mean, I'll be curious. We can jam back and forth on it, but I think that's a tough one always when you're setting expectations with management on running strategies that are either ungated or trying to optimize for in-channel consumption on LinkedIn or any channel for that matter.
Yeah, for sure. So I think you do really have to, first you have to know, what's the journey today? What's the cost today? What are the benchmarks and the conversion rates today? So that you have your kind of, you have your starting point for, okay, this is what I'm trying to optimize, and this is why. And then again, if you come back to them with the logic of, let me ask you a question. If I raise my hand to, initially I've, maybe looked at a couple ads for Gravitee, but I can't really see what it does until I talk to sales. Like, you're telling me I can't see the product until I talk to sales. First of all, like, how does that make you feel as a potential customer?
I like that one.
What would you say about, somebody said that initially to you? That probably doesn't feel very good, and you're not building trust at that point. You're saying, no, I've got this thing, and I'm going to tell you if you can buy it or not, or I'm going to tell you if you can see it or not.
Yeah.
That's not a good way to build trust. So right there, I think you go, okay, well, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And then you kind of get into, okay, let's look at some of the data. Like if you're able to have something like a Chorus AI or Gong, where you can listen in onto those discovery calls. Some of the feedback that we get is people request a demo, and then they get into a conversation with sales. Sales has no context for what they want to see or why.
Mm,
And
right.
so then it ends up being like a 45-minute discovery call about
Yep.
things that they could have learned on their own. Um,
Yep.
and then you've pretty much wasted everybody's time. And then by the time they set the stage for the sales engineer to do the demo, they have like
Right.
15 minutes to walk through like a super technical solution that
So
they don't
crazy.
even have the ability to architect what that should look like, because
Yeah.
with a solution like ours, there might be a sandbox that they would want to set up to really make sure that they hit on all the valuable elements
Right.
of what Gravitee can do. And
Right.
so if you can give them a broad overview, and if it's 5 minutes, if it's 45 minutes, whatever it is, if you can give that all away, they can conceptually see, here's every aspect of this tool. I only care about this one thing. Show me
Yeah.
this one thing. You've already saved an entire 45-minute discovery call that you don't have to do anymore. So
Yeah.
that's already impacting your costs and your and so what I would say is, like if I was pitching this to somebody, I would say, let me take 5% of my budget, set aside an
Yeah.
experiment, and
Exactly.
run that alongside everything else that we're doing, business as usual. And let me do that for maybe, I don't know, 3 to 6 months, and to
Mhm.
really give it like a good amount of data to make
Yep.
some decisions. And then let's see what the numbers tell us. And
Yeah.
I think they would find it hard to argue with that approach.
What I like is I like the way you frame that last question. How would you feel if you couldn't get a demo and you had to reach out and fill out a form and wait a couple of days to talk to an SDR to be qualified by that SDR, and then
Exactly.
ultimately get a demo maybe on the second or third call, right? You probably wouldn't feel so good. And I think generally everyone would probably say, yeah, of course, right? Because no one wants, I mean, humans naturally look for the least path of resistance, right? We've all heard that expression. It is a thing, proven. So we're always going to look for the easiest way to get information, which is why a lot of
Yep.
times what I'll do is if I don't see a demo on the website, I'll go to YouTube immediately.
Yeah.
And I'll say, all right, well, is there anything on YouTube? I don't know. It doesn't have to be from the company. Is there anyone else that did some kind of cool review on XYZ company? Can I just kind of get an idea of like what it does and how it works? And clearly that's
Yeah.
more of a bottom of the funnel type of thing. But I think going back to setting expectations, which is an important one, is yeah, asking a question like that. We do something similar, asking people to also think about, hey, like walk me through the last time you bought software. Walk me through some of the things that you did and like the ways you think. And they're not going to remember everything, right? But they'll remember a handful of things. And so you have to kind of put them in that mindset sometimes of thinking through that. And you only really realize what you're doing until you're like, oh wow, yeah, I guess I did kind of buy it that way, which is probably
Yeah.
not typical of the way I'm trying to execute, which is building this linear waterfall with
Hmm.
some programmatic crazy nonsense that
Yeah.
is leading people down from one piece of content to the other. And then
Hmm.
it's also being what you said too, just to reiterate it, because I think it's important for anyone listening, is goals and understanding existing benchmarks as they are today. If you don't have, I mean, every campaign doesn't have the same goal, right? You can't, I mean, yeah, ideally, sure, we're spending money. We all want it to generate pipeline and revenue, but that doesn't mean that we call this campaign a failure because it didn't generate pipeline. Either way, it's impossible, right? Because I mean, attribution is not perfect, so we've got all those issues there. So we're not going to go down attribution hole, but yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I think there's a lot of stuff there
Yeah.
that you can kind of put back on them and just ask some simple questions to get someone thinking about, hey, this actually might not be the best idea
Yeah.
for us to run this type of play.
Yeah,
So
well, kind of to kind of cap it all off, like the other thing to consider is like, okay, you can ask them, how's it feel to have to, have this long drawn out process to get a demo. And then when you're buying software, you're going to have to do that 3 to 4 more times. So
Exactly.
what happens when you're the solution that you didn't make anybody jump through any of these hoops, and they just went straight to seeing the value, and you made it super easy for them? That's going to be a factor in how they buy. They're going to say, well, I didn't have to do 5 different POC calls with this company just to get a demo of the solution. And they made it super easy. We got a contract, and then we turned it around because it was, it just was easy. So I think people underestimate the value of that.
If you haven't written that post on LinkedIn yet, I think you should.
Yeah.
Because I think if not, I'll quote you, and then I'll CC you on the post because I mean, I think it's just a little thing to get people thinking about how to be more buyer centric versus company centric, and it's so easy to fall in those traps. And I think the younger generation is really not operating that way. I think a lot of people get that. I think it's sometimes the folks that were more used to sales having a lot of control and a lot of power over information, where things were predominantly gated, put behind walls, and sales was the point of contact. And that world is just so not existent anymore at all. And certainly there are big companies that are still operating that way today. But, the companies of the future, like the modern day SaaS companies, have realized that a while ago and know that they need to do things differently, because that's not the way that people that are our age want to buy. So
exactly.
But well, cool, man. We can go all day long. I feel like we scratched the surface on that. There's so many things I wanted to get to, but we went down a couple rabbit holes there. So we'll have to maybe do another episode or something like that. But
yeah, for sure.
For jumping on, man, for at least a little bit.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So cool. All right, man. Well, then until next time.
All right. Well, thanks for listening to another episode of the Demand Podcast. Again, I'm Jonathan Bland, the co-founder of Omni Lab. I'll also have with me Jason Steele, who's the other co-founder of Omni Lab on this podcast as well. We're a demand gen agency for seed to Series B SaaS startups. If you like this episode, or you're looking for some help with demand gen, please feel free to reach out to us on LinkedIn over a DM, or you can go just directly to our website. That's omnilabconsulting.com. Otherwise, we look forward to seeing you on the next episode, where we'll be talking about all things demand gen. Until then, thanks. Bye-bye.